Hi, you're listening to Thoughtful Wellness Revolution, where we believe wellness isn't wellness if it's just for you. We're your hosts, Zara and Hien. And before we get started, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating and review. Even though we're a podcast that believes in decolonizing, we're still bound to the algorithm. So every little bit that you can help us out, we really appreciate it. And we thank you for all the support. Let's get into it. Hey folks, today we're talking to the lovely Jennie Joseph, who is a Florida licensed midwife, president of Sense Childbirth Incorporated, a nonprofit organization located in Central Florida. What's on your mind today, Jennie?
Hi, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you all. So much is on my mind, but I think, considering today's the last day of Black History Month, that always comes up. I mean, I've been in the United States now for 32 years. Born and raised in England, you might be able to tell. But having lived here this long, I'm still it's hard to figure out why we designated this 1 month out of an entire year. Every day, every month, every year is Black History Month as far as I'm concerned, because in the United States, that's how we got here. That's what this is. And so I am still trying to fit myself into being American as a Black woman, but also having had opportunity to grow, learn, be educated, practice my craft as a midwife in Europe and other countries. And, again, having been here for 32 years, I've had quite of a struggle. It's not been easy, not been impossible, but it's been a journey. And so much of it is based on understanding the history, unraveling and unpacking that history, making sense of that history, and then trying to put together programs and resources to help support people who still to this day are suffering because of this history. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a midwife, I catch babies, but that's not really what I do anymore. My work has turned into finding ways to support folk structurally and institutionally and personally and in community to get to their best possible pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. And that's what's on my mind. Always.
Well, first and foremost, yes to everything you said. I think, wow, yeah, it's so important to remember the fact that every day, every month in this country should be about Black history, because that is how we got to be where we are in this country, and the recognition for that. And I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to put it all together, but I do want to bring it back a bit, I guess, to midwifery versus obstetrics, and ask you a bit if you could de-woo-woo. There's so much anti-pseudoscience going on within the midwifery field. If you could talk to us a little bit about the differences and how we understand them.
That's a great question, Zara. Thank you for that. And what's interesting is even now, I still find myself having to stop, even go further back than that and explain what midwifery is. 32 years later, I'm still being met, whoa, midwife, what's that? There isn't anywhere else in the entire world where that's a question, because everybody knows what a midwife is everywhere else. And so midwifery in the United States has had its sort of fluctuations. It's grown, it's receded, it's disappeared altogether, it's been eradicated. Now it's in another resurgence. But because it has been through this sort of tumultuous ride, especially in the last 100 years, people nowadays don't actually really know what a midwife is. So first and foremost, a midwife is a healthcare provider, practitioner who supports women, mothers, people through pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and really through times between babies as well, women's healthcare. Obstetricians, on the other hand, at least in the rest of the world, handle complicated cases of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. They are trained and skilled, highly skilled, I might add, to do more deep work, more important work, more life-saving work, including surgery such as cesarean section when it's needed, as far as managing and supporting pregnant people through the childbearing experience. So the two things have always been very distinct in my world, my British training, which I started in 1979, so I've been doing this a very long time. Yes, I'm an old lady. But when I arrived in the United States, I had no concept that obstetricians in the US would be doing normal birth. Obstetricians take care of all the normal cases. The majority of births in the United States are delivered by doctors, obstetricians, people trained in the art and science of doing prenatal care and delivering babies. So when you look at that right there, you know there's a problem, because now you have highly skilled folk who have great acumen and abilities to help when something goes wrong, but they are relegated to taking care of the normal and the boring. Now, if we go to the total other side of the spectrum, if you think about it, what have women been doing for millennia? Having babies. How do you think we all got here? It's like this sort of kind of fact that is so stark and real, yet we like to just brush it under the rug and join in with the drama of, oh, it's touch and go. Americans, I'm talking about. Because again, most every other country and culture has not got a problem with midwifery being the first and foremost source of support for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So here we have this fear, I call it the fear-based industry of childbirth in the United States. And I put it in those terms simply because most people, and maybe even yourselves, a pregnancy ensues whether you're planning or not planning, and panic stations. Woof. Oh my God, the test is positive, knees go to jello, heart starts pounding. What am I going to do? I got to find a doctor. I got to find this. I got to do that. Right? Fear. And that fear is perpetuated, I say on purpose, because there's money being made, money changing hands, systems and structures that are set up to manage the fear, manage the panic, and to also create the specialty around birth that in any other medical discipline is not necessary, because guess what? Birth is a normal life event. It's kind of like getting your period or having constipation. Stuff that happens to your body happens, and for the most part will be resolved because it's part of your body, right? Menopause shows up. We don't have any control over these things, but this is what happens because part of life. So where we have taken on and put interventions in play that have actually modified not only how we feel, but physiologically as well, how we actually birth. We now see the detriment of that in the statistics that once again are also specific to the United States. There's no accident here. We have the worst maternal and infant mortality and morbidity outcomes in any developed nation. We also happen to be the most resourced nation in the entire world. Yet women are dying in childbirth in the US, sometimes higher rates than some of the developing countries. How shameful. How shameful. But why is that? Because we can't behave. We keep interfering. We cut more than, well, let's say 1 in 3, that's the statistic currently, of women are being delivered by cesarean section. So what does that mean? That people on this body of land have teeny tiny pelvises and the babies don't fit? Like, come on. What is it that justifies surgeries to that level to provide women with supposedly safe care, yet our statistics show we're more at risk of dying or being harmed, disabled, or unsafe post-delivery due to these surgical interventions, the pushing and forcing of labors through inductions, the all of these other factors that have played into our poor outcomes. So when you sit back a minute, take a look at it in the cold, hard light of day and realize, no, something's wrong here. Something smells bad. Unfortunately, what it is, I'm just going to say it out loud. I mean, you know, you can kick me off your podcast if you like, but it's the medical industrial complex. This is on purpose. This has been set up, and it began when the midwives were eradicated in the mid-20th century. So let me just flip back a little bit further, because historically it's important to recognize midwifery came to the United States with the African enslaved women. They were the mainstay of maintaining the plantation and the commodity that was human beings. The midwives had special favor because they were keeping the master's stock strong, healthy. The midwives also continued after slavery ended and Jim Crow and Reconstruction came into play because they were the ones trained and able to deliver. They delivered Black and white. They delivered most everybody, not just south of the United States, across the United States. The immigrants brought their midwives with them. The European immigrants, all of the immigration, there was never a shortage of, well, who's going to deliver this baby? That wasn't the problem. Everybody had their babies at home. Everybody knew where their midwife was. They knew how to find and access their midwives. But midwifery, just like everything else in America, was racialized. In 1921, when the Shepherd-Towner Act was passed, which was an act of parliament, which said we need to address the infant mortality problem in the South, the white public health nurses were deployed and sent to the South. The white health departments were opened up and the midwives were eradicated. It was called the midwife problem. The physicians took over. They started trying to get women into the hospitals for delivery. But of course, Black women and people of color weren't allowed in those hospitals. Segregation. We haven't come much further. It doesn't, if you don't realize how we got here, you don't see it. But when you do realize how we got here, you can see that, again, 90% of births are managed by obstetricians and 90% of people deliver in the hospital. There's a real interesting conundrum here, because if you go outside of that system, again, more fear, well, you're going to take your life in your hands. What's wrong with you? Don't you care about your baby? Don't you have insurance? All of these tropes show up. And so it's not so much about the science, like you posed in the question, Zara, but more about the politics. It's about classism. It's about racism. It's about sexism. It's about discrimination against marginalized people. It's about power.
Thank you. Oh, please keep going. No, I just want to say, to voice it so definitively of like, this is the problem we value and appreciate. And also you will never be kicked off our podcast for talking about the medical industrial complex. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just learned so much in that. I know Hien, I'm sure you did as well. I mean, I knew about midwifery being a practice that came with people, that it's a thing that we have had forever. And it does really, definitely in this country, it ties to racism. You were just telling us about segregation and Jim Crow laws and the midwifery problem. And I think it also served, it seems, as a way to almost diminish communities for women and people who give birth, you know what I mean? And because if you cut off, if you just go to a doctor's office, that's a you event by yourself, that's the system now. The system used to be your grandma knew, her grandma knew, your aunt knew, so-and-so, everyone has someone to be with them. So I would love if you could speak a bit more. Well, I really want to ask you about is to talk more about your work and being a midwife, but I am curious about your thoughts around what it means for birthing as midwifery and birthwork to be community oriented.
Yeah, well, I have made my life's work, my American life's work, about the reinstatement of community midwives. That's where I felt like I could make the most difference. Now, when I first got here, I was all about the individual care. I was running a home birth practice. I used to travel all around Central Florida and support mothers who chose home birth. And what I noticed about the mothers that were asking for my care and support, they were well educated, they were very affluent, they had agency and power of their own, they were supported in their choices. Many of these were also homeschooling or doing things where, they were like taking on much more responsibilities around health and pregnancy and birth. And so I was happy to work with them. I was thrilled, actually. But what I noticed was I didn't see the diversity. I didn't see the demographic that I really wanted to serve, because I knew those outcomes were out there. So over the course of years, I've opened a birthing center where we had more options for people who were low income, for example, or on Medicaid, to encourage them into the practice. And there has been that shift, but not the great rush that I was expecting. But where it all changed for me, I'm going to think now back how far along it was. It was probably early 2000s that it dawned on me, hold up. Where I'm having resistance to people choosing the choices that I thought were best for them, such as having a midwife birth, having an out-of-hospital birth, where the resistance was showing up was that people, in general, because of what they've learned or the society that we're in now, like you say, the extended family is long gone, they have felt that they were compelled to be in the hospital for their birth. So in other words, the opposite was true. Being out of the hospital was not a safe choice for them. And so as a midwife, I was like, for a while, like, oh, but no, let me explain, let me educate, let me cajole, let me beg and plead. And I realized, no, stop that. It is about choice at the end of the day. It's about self-determination. And so wherever you feel you want to be, I want to support that. So I created a clinic that said, you have your baby where you want, have it by the side of the road, not my problem. I want to help you get through the pregnancy, get to full term, come out the other end, ready to parent, ready to feed your baby, ready to get back into your life, move forward with your family. And it doesn't matter where you have the baby. And it truly didn't matter. And I tell you why this was the biggest turning point for me. It opened the floodgates. Everybody wanted that care. That was the birth of what I call now the easy access clinic. So the fact was, one, you didn't have to designate where you were delivering. I wasn't bothered. If you wanted a hospital birth, I'm going to support you, and then you're going to get a hospital birth. So I set up that my patients could deliver in the hospital with the physicians, the OBs that were on call and who would receive them and take care of them on my behalf. I didn't have to be the midwife in the hospital. The other piece, though, and this is really important because this speaks to the social and economic and political side of birth. I started a program, it was nonprofit, and I still have a nonprofit organization to this day, where the mission is no one turned away. Imagine that. And everybody thought I was crazy. What do you mean? You can't afford to do that. That's not right. If you can't afford to have a baby, you shouldn't be having one. You should make them pay. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, the baby's in the belly already. The choice has been made. They are moving forward. So now what you going to do? Have them suffer? Come on. So we opened up from the perspective of you choose where you want to deliver. You choose what you want. We'll stand with you. We'll help you. You will not get shut out because you don't have the funds or the insurance. And that set me on a path of learning how to help people get on the stinking Medicaid. That in of itself is a whole big thing. We are now expert at helping people get through these bureaucratic hurdles to get their insurance coverage that they well deserve. And actually is their right. Right? So we figured those kinds of things out. We took on how do you navigate, these systems that are so unwieldy that even the people in them don't know how to navigate them, right? We took that on. We took on bring everybody you can find, bring your neighbor. If somebody dropped you off, they get to come in and listen to the heartbeat as well so that we can start reconnecting and building family and community around you because you're having a baby. Like what else would you do? Right? So in doing things that way, it grew past midwifery. It grew into what I now have as my 4 tenets of my program: access, connections, knowledge, empowerment. And what we saw with that, and this is the part that really I just want to stress, at the other side of this kind of approach, our statistics were blown out of the water. We did not have premature babies anymore. Black women, Latinas were going to term. What? We didn't do anything fancy. We weren't doing special high-risk obstetrics and, extra sonograms and more into, we were like, look, sis, what's up? Okay, let's see if we can fix it. Can we work together? You're okay. You're safe. Don't worry, we got you. And between us all, we would troubleshoot our way through all the crazy, get everybody off the ledge, take a breath. Let's just have this baby. Let's just celebrate this child. Let's build community. And that got us full-term babies, healthy weight babies. Our average babies are 7.5 pounds. out of skinny butt ladies. You would look at, look like little twig stick insects, that, skin and bone. You're like, where? Or overweight, because this whole, oh my God, obesity, she's so fat, look, how could she put herself at risk? Stop it. Stop it. Unreasonable, unnecessary, blaming people and putting it all on them when it's the system that is at fault. It is the structure that is at fault. It's the institutional way of being that is the United States of America. That is the reason for the statistics. It's not because of the women. It's not because you're Black. It's not because of your race. It's racism. So now we have this work where we open up clinics. We have a Spanish language clinic. We used to have a Portuguese language clinic, but we lost our Portuguese practitioner right now. But we work to make sure our care is safe, that there's quality care, that it matches what you need individually, that it's culturally congruent, that we are centering mama baby family, community. That's our center. We are doing that as our work. We're working around whatever it is that you need to get you to the other side. And here's the thing, everybody wins, because guess what? We love it. Like, I am still sky high 40 years into midwifery doing this work because we love it, because it's so rewarding, because it's so empowering, because you see those women and people transform in front of your very eyes. You see families just flourish. People are coming back with big, fat, chunky children in their arms, breastfeeding, and say, look, Miss Jenny, look what happened. You can't beat that with a stick. And they're doing that inside of the system. They're going into the same hospitals that are turning out these statistics, and they are winning. Our COVID year, we did our statistics for 2020, and we had 456 patients that year that came through the Easy Access Clinic, of which we had one premature baby who survived, and we had a 17% C-section rate. Now, with COVID, every 5 minutes somebody was being cut. Everybody's doula and supporter was being shut out at the door. It was madness for a while through the COVID year. But our mothers got up there and got through and came out the other end without a scratch. The average C-section is anywhere from 30 to 40%. 17. And we are not even going to the hospital with these people. They are going and fighting for themselves, fending for themselves. They know what to expect. They're educated. They're ready to go. So this work has become more than just a midwifery journey. I still do midwifery. I still have a birth center. I provide out-of-hospital birth for people who choose out-of-hospital birth. I have a midwifery school. I train midwives to do midwifery work in the model that I do, which is community midwifery, like the old midwives, the granny, so-called granny midwives. That's what they did. That's what the Native American midwives did and still do. That's what the indigenous midwives did and still do. That's what the rest of the entire world's midwives do, except for us. And look. So, did I answer your question?
You answered my question in a way I couldn't have even thought that you would have answered it in such a great way. Wow. It is just amazing to hear how the actual statistics of what you're making happen with the work you're doing, because it is I know it to be amazing because my mom used to work with you. I have known you for 2/3 of my life. I don't love saying that number, but here we are. And I think to how many times I've either had friends come to me to ask me about midwifery, or reproductive stuff, or I've been able to support people. And those are in minor ways. I know someone I follow on the internet, she is pregnant and was posting about, gosh, I just want to eat canned tomato soup and canned vegetables. And so I sent her a thing because I know that from your work. It was just hey, I think you might have an iron deficiency. You should go get tested. Surprise, surprise. she in fact had an iron deficiency. And I know that from stories my mom used to tell me from working with you. So it is like, there's such a community aspect to birth work and reproductive health and reproductive work and community work that I think your work has a way of really bringing that back in, and it's really beautiful. Yeah, Hien, did you have a question? You look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just feel like, first of all, thank you for sharing so much passionately. Like, I just really, Zara and I, we're pretty blunt here on our podcast too. So the way that you shared the history with us so passionately, the way that you share about your work so passionately, and the way you like really named just the systems and the structures that we're in being the problem. Like, I'm so grateful for that, because even though I know that, and Zara knows that, and I think most of our listeners know that, it's easy to forget and feel like it's our fault. Because something that struck with me was when you were talking about the way there's like a fear-based sort of mentality or vibe with thinking about birth here in the US. And I feel like that is so true, because when I think about it, it just sounds so scary and so stressful. So like, I'm not a parent, and like, when I think about like, oh, but if I were to get pregnant, like it's like what you said, I'm thinking about it being like super freaking out and being like, I'm not sure my body is capable. And like, I'm scared of this and that. And I just love the way you talked about it to let me know that it's actually really natural and normal. And whatever fear-based thing I had is probably because it's so linked to the medical industrial complex, because it tends to be about like the problems, right? Like the obstetrics going to with like the complicated issues and like saving lives and stuff. And so I associate with that of like, oh my gosh, I could die giving birth. Like that, like my mind just goes to like the worst case scenario.
Right.
And now I kind of know how it got there.
Yes. Well, Hien, I think it's really important to acknowledge that and name it as well, because we tend to brush so much stuff under the rug. But I do want to bring another point, and that is that fear is also on the obstetric side. It's not their fault, okay? We have to have some compassion, just as we do for families. And I feel that we should have some compassion for the providers. What a mess to have to work inside of a structure that isn't of your doing, but is perpetuated. We send these young folk off to medical school and we beat them down. They go in with such energy, verve, and liveliness about, I'm going to help save the world. And they come out downtrodden, beaten down, scared out of their wits, scared of being sued, scared of losing everything they've worked for, scared of being ostracized. They are scared. They don't trust because they can't trust. Inside of the system that they're working in is also detrimental to them, their health and their well-being. You talk about moral injury. Imagine every day having to do something that you know is wrong. But that's what they do. This is what you have to do if you want to keep your job. So I have learned over the years not to just be casting blame everywhere, wishy-washy, thinking it through and understanding the dilemma these folk are facing, because the structures are in place. So I'm going to talk about Serena Williams real quick, because she's used to this now. Everybody's talking about Serena, and she shared her story, and I'm grateful she did, because she didn't have to. But Serena nearly died having her baby in the middle of a hospital, and her wealth and celebrity did not protect her because she still has black skin. So imagine being a medical provider inside of that. Imagine you're the nurse that told her no. Why do you think the nurse felt empowered to tell her no, go back in your room, there's nothing wrong with you, or words to that effect, for days, until somebody decided to listen and do the CAT scan that saved her life, that showed the blood clots that she had told them she had were there. But imagine you're the provider in the midst of, right? Because the acceptance in the structure is that institutionally the racism is embedded and built and condoned. That's a mess, especially if you're aware of it. So you probably know there's been the last few years this rush to do implicit bias training. So we can all individually check our biases at the door. Yeah, right, you can check all day long, but the system still says, uncheck them and get on with doing what you're supposed to do so we can make more money, because it's a business. Okay, so we have both sides of this problem here. Everybody's losing out right now. That's why I said earlier, in my world and my work, everybody wins because we're happy. We are free of the institution. But that's not realistic. You can't just up and change an institution up, make it all kumbaya and friendly so that everybody's feeling good. That's not either going to happen. We need to look at this in more in-depth and real practical ways, right? You build hospitals with massive NICUs, neonatal intensive care units. Why? So you can put Black and brown babies in them. That is the purpose of having a NICU. So you don't actually want to create anything that stops the prematurity that fills your NICU. Let's be realistic. So how about being the physician that's fighting with micro preemies all day, every day, and feeling overwhelmed with that and hurt and, you know, just downtrodden, but knowing that that's the reason the NICU exists and new hospitals keep getting built with new NICUs. We build a maternity hospital, and how many obstetric operating theaters, ORs do you build? You build a whole slew so you can keep cutting people. Like, it's not rocket science, but it's hard to just call it what it is. And it leaves everybody in this sort of helpless, miserable, downtrodden place. We lose the joy which is there inherently in birth, not only for the birthing family, but for their family and community, and for the providers of that care. That's why historically midwives have always been praised and lauded and supported. Historically, midwifery has been passed down through generations, from mother to daughter, niece, aunt, cousin. It was passed on through your family. Those skills were learned empirically. You were chosen. It was deeper spiritually than it is now, because it wasn't just a matter of, let's just extract this child out of your body one way or another, whichever way, belly or bottom, just get it out. It wasn't that. It never has been until now, and until in this country. So to be positive and to encourage folk, because of course many of us are still, not me, but many are facing childbearing maybe down the road still. What I try to do is have people recognize, just like you said here, your power is already there. You did not sit down and plan when your period would show up. You did not sit down and plan when your menopause will show up. You did not sit down and plan when all of these things that happen to your body because they happen to your body. Likewise, when pregnancy happens to your body, it happens and it does what it needs to do. Whether you know anything about your placenta or your, lactation, you don't have to know any of that. Baby's in the belly, baby will grow. Placenta will grow, placenta will provide. Baby comes out of your bottom, gets on the breast, milk is produced, baby is nourished, end of story. You have no power over that, right? So if you did nothing, if you knew nothing, your odds are pretty good, because this is what's happened, which is why the world is as populated as it is, right? So yes, we have got a mortality and a morbidity problem, but it's because we caused it.
Wow. Yes. And I think that's fascinating to me that it's so blank, like we have caused the problem. And it makes me, so in previous episodes, we have talked about almost this difference between, I think it might have been Michelle Hien who talked about the two lenses. So like, we have the idea of being able to see things through like our Western science lens. And then there is,
it was Melissa.
Melissa, thank you. Indigenous, almost empirical knowledge that you get from experience, right? There's no other way about it. It's passed down. And I think that what I'm really hearing from you, sorry, my dog is being a bit of a, but just that, you have these two lenses, right? The empirical lens, the Western lens versus the Indigenous knowledge, experiential lens. And I think that's very much what you're describing here, is that almost like obstetrics and the medical industrial complex in and of itself has become so focused on finding, we have to prove that it's true and those are the only things we can do, that it loses that sense of confidence and intuitive knowing that comes from midwifery as a practice almost, right?
Absolutely. And the other piece, which is, there's the physiological, again, the growing of the baby, the fetus, the placenta, the, delivery, the lactating, all of these pieces, those are the physiological pieces. But the other pieces, and what you're referring to, is the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual. The lived experience is what we lost when we couldn't hand it down any further, any longer. And we lost it when we lost our extended families. But more importantly, what I found is, I think in this community-minded midwifery that I'm training folk in and that we're now trying to move forward and scale, the lived experience can still be found in the community supporters, right? These aren't necessarily midwives, but they're doulas who provide non-medical care and support, the community health workers, the lactation, the breastfeeding supporters, the childbirth educators, the holistic providers. They have lived experience and lived knowledge. And then there's also just that plain good old common sense that Miss Susie down the way, you know she knows, and she can say it in the way that makes sense to you as well. And you can trust her. So my school is called Common Sense Childbirth School of Midwifery. Everything I do starts with common sense, right? So my organization is Common Sense Childbirth, but my school is Common Sense Childbirth School of Midwifery. Just so you know, it is the only, and it's the first, as far as we can tell, we're still researching, but it looks like it's the first Black-owned midwifery school in the entire United States, right? And we are now accredited. We got accredited in 2020. So it's an accredited midwifery school. But here's what I'm up to: returning trusted community-based providers to the communities that need them. Trusted. We can rebuild trust when we depend on all these other things that you're talking about, Zara. We don't need to depend on the medical piece, that's in hand. The resources are there for high risk. The resources are also there for low risk. But what we have added to the picture is the wraparound support from people that you trust is the protective factor. So whether you're currently pregnant or not, you need to be enveloped into that trust. You need to know your resources in your communities. You need to know, and we've always known, but we've just kind of forgotten. And we've just kind of ignored. And we haven't accepted and acknowledged that that knowledge, that infinite wiseness, wisdom has been there. We just now need to remind ourselves and each other. Go there first. Dig there. That well is deep. There's no shortage. We can rebuild our own communities based on trusted providers being there to guide us, to support us, to shepherd us. And then we can avail ourselves of whatever, midwife, obstetrician, perinatologist, whoever specialist we want, because we are girded up and supported around while we avail ourselves of those other services as well. We won't be swayed, we won't be fearful, because we have the support that's been lacking. If giving a woman a minute to sit down and let her tell a story is enough to lock her cervix tight and keep a baby inside her belly, then that's my sense. That's what's working.
Yes, absolutely. Being able to provide what people need. How can non-pregnant people or people who are child-free or not wanting to have children, how can they support this movement? This is kind of a two-parted question because we're running out of time. But also I'd love to hear more of what you'd like to see, something you'd like to see more of in the birth field and something you'd like to see less of in birth work or wellness in general.
Well, I think everybody needs to be all hands on deck, because if you nurture and support the childbearing people, you rebuild and strengthen community. So you don't have to be one of those people. You have to understand the importance of supporting and being there for those people. That's the easiest way in. Just be willing and open to chip in, step up as called upon. So sometimes I give real tangible examples of that. So, you know, so-and-so needs a ride to the clinic. Okay, can you give her a lift or not? Yes, you can, no, you can't. That's it, it's that simple. Don't make it painful, don't make it complicated. Is there a way you can step in to say, I'm here for you? That's it. That will begin that movement towards overall support. As far as what I want to see more of, I want to see more of an openness to, it's not about that I'm fighting for midwifery as the only way or the best way. I'm fighting for equity. And I want to see more of an understanding of what equity looks like in the childbearing ecosystem. So I'm about building infrastructure. That's what I'm up to right now. I'm talking about we need to have our buildings, we need to own our stuff, we need to train our providers, we need to dig in. I want that community space. I want to be in that community space. That's where I feel like we can come alongside with a system that will come, you know, rather than take over. I'm not trying to burn it all down like I used to be, you know, like let's go down and just march on the hospital. I'm done with that. Let's come alongside. We need the hospitals. We need those physicians. Let's come alongside. I want that community space to grow and to be strengthened in ability to provide health support and services in maternal health care. And what I want less of is obviously less racism, less classism, less sexism. Let's stop the gender discrimination. That needs to go. Eliminate right now. There is no excuse to keep going on. How many centuries are we going to be acting like this? It's done. Let's just call it off and let's grow and support our families and our communities to the fullest. That's what we could do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. And where can people get in touch with you?
Real easy. You can find me at commonsensechildbirth.org. So one word, common sense, one word, childbirth.org. So that's how I do. I spell it the English way. It's all in one, commonsensechildbirth.org. And you can see our work. We have the school, we have the movement building work of the national work that we do. We have the local clinic, we have the birthing center. And of course you have me running around talking because I love to talk about this all day long. So everything starts at commonsensechildbirth.org. And you can jump off from there wherever you're interested. And we take donations there too.
Thank you so much, Jennie.
Thank you, Jennie.
So this is our post-interview with Jennie, and I just feel so inspired listening to Jennie talk, and I learned so much, and I just really feel the humanity in everything that Jennie shared about her work. And I don't know, I just have a lot of appreciation for the fact that I live during the same time that Jennie is alive. That's pretty cool. Like, Jennie is so awesome that I'm like, wow, I'm so glad to be alive in the same time as someone like her.
I am feeling very similarly. And I'm someone who, again, I've known Jennie for, I don't know, so many years, so many years. Oh my God, more than 20 years, too many years. I'll stop saying that, stop saying years. But yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I've always known, because I've spent time as a kid growing up in that practice and just knowing Jennie throughout my life, that like, she was really awesome and the work she was doing was really cool and inspirational in so many ways. Well, actually, growing up as a kid, I thought that it was a normal thing, but that's besides the point. That's because that was my framework as a child. But like, knowing that she did all these cool and important things is like really cool. And I'm also in awe of her now, realizing, I don't know, it's nice to see all of the radical people that, you know, growing up who like have shaped your view in a way where it's like, oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, wow, your like beliefs and your work is really integrated into how I see the world. And I think that's really special. So yeah, this is like me. What is it? Smug Charlotte. I was watching And Just Like That this weekend. And because I didn't have anything else to do. Not because it's good, but they call her Smug Charlotte when she talks about something. And that's how I feel saying that I've known Jennie forever. I'm Smug Charlotte right now. No, but I feel really grateful to see the work and speak with someone who can share with us so much that we didn't know and stuff that we did know and explain the why almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there are no words to capture like the power in what, Jennie shared with us. And it's probably going to be the type of podcast episode that I'm going to want to listen to multiple times, just because just so much that she shared. And I just love the passion in her voice when she shared everything. I mean, me and Zara, like, we're passionate. And so that passion is just really beautiful to see in someone else as well.
Absolutely. I love the passion, and I love the practicality of it, because there is nothing sexier in the whole world than someone who's really passionate about advocacy, and for that advocacy to be practical. You know what I mean? Like common sense childbirth, and like the way that I wish we had more time to talk to her about like the JJ way, the Jennie Joseph way, where the 4 pillars, where it's like access, community, education, the third one might be wrong, and empowerment. And it's like, from providing women with those 4 seemingly very basic things, or not just women, but people who are reproducing, how do you say, people who are pregnant? Thank you. I forgot the word pregnant for a second. Oof, it's been a long day. But like, when you're just providing pregnant people with those 4 very simple pillars, birth rate, birth complications, death rates, all these things are going down. And it's like, oh, right, because the issue isn't that we don't have the knowledge or the tools, it's that we've forgotten the humanity piece of it.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think, gosh, she mentioned some stats early on the podcast, and it like kind of blew my mind, because she would share these stats and then she'll be like, and we're the most resourced country in the world. And I'm like, yeah, shit. Like, there is definitely something wrong with how we're doing things. And I'm just so grateful for her for providing like basically another way, another like a solution, like solutions, but also just like, this is another way of doing things. And because that's like what this whole project, this podcast is about at Thoughtful Wellness Revolution, is we want to show folks that there are other ways, and there are ways to bring humanity back into wellness in whatever field that you may be in. And there's a way to bring back humanity into how you live and the relationships you have with folks around you, the community, which, Jennie is really big on, with talking about birthwork and community. And that like also really, I felt like, clarified some things for me as well. And we talk about that more in the bonus episode. And so I'm just going to plug this really fast here, sign up, subscribe to our Substack for $5 a month for the bonus episodes, in which we talk a little bit more about that. But yeah.
Yeah, I also want to add that we are thinking of adding some other fun bonus content coming soon, hopefully, that I'm not going to disclose too much about, but it is exciting and we are excited about that. But yeah, absolutely. Being able to provide common sense, practical care that is community oriented is just, I don't know. It's wonderful. It's magical. It's so uplifting to hear. And I also think it's a reminder of why we do this podcast, because like you were saying, like, to uplift people who are doing it and are providing answers. It's also for all of us listening, and for all of us maybe not doing it or doing it in a different field or different way, is like, there are already people doing the stuff. White supremacy has us believing, and perfection culture, and has us believing that we have to be the one to solve the problem. People are already creating solutions and or have solutions. We just need to be united with them and figure out what our space is working with that.
Yeah, totally. 100% to that. And I think also what you're speaking to, Zara, is just thinking about like solidarity. Like, it's kind of funny the way I'm about to say this, but now I'm actually legit thinking about how I can be in solidarity. And that's not a word that Jennie used, but I think basically when she's talking about community, it's like, how can I be in solidarity with the pregnant people in my community? How can I be in solidarity with families? And not see them as separate from me, who's like a single woman who's child free, that they're also part of my community, which is so wild. Like the way I put that sounds really funny, but I have to ask myself that, because I have been raised and living in a culture where and again, we say this, I feel like we say this word like in every post-interview episode, but like we kind of compartmentalize different aspects of our life and our wellness. And so I'm just thinking again, a little bit more holistically, is that these people around me, yeah, their lives and their families may look different than mine right now, but they are part of my community and they do deserve to be supported.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I also think it's interesting that we have such a different perspective on it, because, and maybe, I don't know if it's the background in education, because we're similar in a lot of ways, but I am obsessed with pregnant people and babies and children, like in maybe a weird way, where if I see one, it's like all I can think about, and I just want to talk to them and support them. Which is like great, because that's what we should be doing, because I think of it so much as like, you have with the future right now. This is the future. Like what you do right now and what you do in this child's life is so much going to impact the world we live in. And that's the thing that really like drives me. But it is exactly what she was saying. And I think it's like an important shift for everyone to have, because it's not like I have the right mindset and you have the wrong mindset, because I think that's, again, white supremacist dichotomy. But like, yeah, the idea that we can, because maybe I don't need to be so obsessed with pregnant people and just let them have their space because they're growing humans, and where other people would like, oh, I don't recognize them, to be like, oh, right, you're building the future. That's important too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should say, because I feel like I don't want people on a podcast or listening to a podcast to think that I like hate babies or pregnant people.
And that's why I had to say, because I don't think that's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess with me, it's like I have a big extended family. So I will say, like, in terms of like community, I do have a big extended family who, on my mom's side, I mean, also my dad's side, but I'm just closer to my mom's side, and we're all in the same area. And so growing up, I was the oldest child on my mom's side. And so I'm like the older big cousin or whatever. And so I saw a lot of my aunts get pregnant and have babies. And I have a lot of little cousins who, Zara, I talk about my cousins to you. We try to like discover their, types and all that. And so, I was around babies a lot and children a lot growing up, just because I was the oldest and was around my aunts when they were pregnant. And, I love them, right? So it's not like I'm some asshole who just like hates pregnant people and babies, but I just think like, I feel that way because they're my family. But when it's people who are not my family, I just like don't feel much at all. So it's not like I like dislike them, but I'm just kind of like, okay, cool. Like you're going to have another kid, or like there's another family, or like whatever. And it's just this sort of like, I don't want to say like I'm purposely differing myself from them, but I think on some unconscious level that happens. If it's like, oh yeah, it's like that person like has a family and like all the like, I don't know, suburban dreams that come with it. And I, am 4. So I'm in like this existential world. And also like, to be honest, not so much now, but definitely envy was a big part as well when I was younger. I remember as a young adult, I used to be very envious of folks who I see in my head. I thought they had it all, and simply because they were married and had a job they loved and had a baby. And I just thought like, wow, that is it. And I can never get that because I'm too weird for anyone to really love me. And I'm a 4 and I'm from a broken family and all that. And so there was also that as well. A lot of that I have now since healed, but there is still the sense of like, okay, like, yeah, if it's my family, I pay a lot of attention to you. But if it's just some random person that who's not in my family, I just kind of don't, it's not that I like dislike them or anything. I just like really don't think about it and don't really care about, when people post about their pregnancy or their kids, I might like the photo, but I don't really like feel connected to it, if that makes sense. But now I'm feeling like, oh, but I should, because they're a part of my community. Because this person, when I'm talking about this, it's like people in my community, it's like, I should feel connected to that. Like I should be like rooting for them and their kids and the success of their family because they're in my freaking community. So yeah, that's all. Like I mean that's a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, no. And I love that. And I appreciate the clarification because I also didn't mean it in the way of like, I love babies and you hate babies. I'm a good woman and you're a bad woman. Just, I think in the sense of the way, I don't know, just bring it back to what Jenny's talked about as like the institution of birthing in America makes it an isolated experience versus a communal experience. And bringing it back to the communal piece, I think is really what you're talking about is like, oh, right, we're all a community. And I think that's all we want for pregnant people is for you to feel in community and supported and have access. And the other pillar that I can't remember, so that we can build a better world, man. Fuck, I love kids so much. I'm trying not to like well up with tears and think about how much I really like kids. And like that's why I really love Jenny's work and this work in general is like, I always say this thing during coaching, which I don't really do anymore, so I guess I don't say it as much anymore, but that everyone is just a little kid inside, you know what I mean? And so when you start treating people not in a pejorative way or in a like dismissive way, where it's like, yeah, you're a little kid, just like when people are being an asshole, it's much easier to be like, right, this is a child that hasn't learned how to process this versus like, they don't like me or whatever thing may be coming up about that, because it's usually like a you thing. And so it's like midwifery and children and education and birthwork, it's just all stuff that ties to really fostering a society where those little kids that grow up to be all of us are able to process and share things in a way that's helpful, and we don't have to have temper tantrums and throw and hit things and, you know, whatever. Yeah, so as now everyone on this podcast knows, I am truly obsessed with children in a way that is, I don't know, it would be super weird if I were a cishet man. I'm just saying. Or perceived that way.
I don't know. I don't think it's weird. I think like, I don't know. I always feel like there's always, I don't know, just in my world growing up, yeah, there's always people around me who enjoyed being around kids, you know, and that's why they are, say, my teachers, right? Growing up, my teachers and the school staff and my mentors, and it wasn't in a weird way, but they also really loved kids. And I love kids who are in my family, and I love kids as an idea, but in terms of like interaction, I feel like they need to be 10 and up for me to fully get along with them. Like I'm outing myself as whatever you want to call it, but like, you know, I have experience working with middle school and high school, and I love that. Like I love teaching to that age group. A little bit younger than that, I think that's more Zara's territory.
Yeah. I love those kids, but I also recognize that when, and this is not a blame on parents as specifics, but more of the institution of raising families in this country, that when children are, we'll say just emotionally neglected, in a way, because so many of us are, like basically our entire generation was starved of emotional fulfillment, which is why we're all traumatized, in addition to other things, obviously. But I do struggle a lot with kids when they're not when they don't have the tools or the capacity to listen, to understand the tools. I really struggle to interact with them. So
That's
it's
fair.
Yeah, we're not without that, because I know I can think of some kids right now where I'm just like, oh, not you again. Even though I do love them, and for like an hour and a half I'm like, you're the best thing in the whole world, and then they're overtired and they have a meltdown and I'm like, I'm gonna give you back now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that is more than fair. But Zara, what's on your mind outside of the conversation we just had with Jenny?
Well, it is the last day in February. And I have spent the weekend, it's a Monday, I have spent the weekend doom scrolling about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And we have discussed this stance beforehand because we are not nuanced in this subject or area to discuss it. So I will say
no, wait, I think it's because we are nuanced enough that we want to say we don't know enough.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't know enough to have a conversation about what is going on in the Ukraine and Russia, other than the fact that we are anti-war and anti-imperialistic, and that there is just so much propaganda flying around all the time. And yeah, so I guess a thing that is also on my mind is media literacy and how we just truly need to be getting that out there. I bought a book by George Orwell today called The Politics of the English Language, or Politics of Language. Very short read, but is about media literacy. So that is what's on my mind. What's on your mind today?
Thank you, Zara, for sharing all that. I think what's on my mind today is it's raining a lot. Like and I live in a place that rains a lot, but it is raining. It feels more and harder than it has in a while. And so that's funny that is what's on my mind. But what's on my mind is just the fact that like I go on my weather app and where I live, and it just says it's 100% chance of rain, basically until, let's see when it stops or when it begins to come down. Well, it's like 100% chance of rain for like the next like 2 hours. Then it drops to 90%, but we all know, people who live where I live in the Seattle area, we all know that means it's going to rain. And then at around midnight, it drops to 80%. But basically, it's going to rain the whole night. That's basically what I'm saying. Like, I think it goes down to maybe 70%. But I'm just thinking about the rain. And the weather being kind of gloomy. And it's funny, but I don't hate it, at least this time. Like, I hate the idea of it raining a lot in general, even though I live here, funny enough. But I'm feeling like that sort of like, I want to go into like a cafe and like get a coffee or a latte and sit down with a book and be like the cool, mysterious girl. Like, and that's such a 4 fantasy. I'm sure other 4s know what I mean, but that's kind of like the vibe I'm feeling.
I love that for you, and I think you should 100% do that.
You don't think I'm kind of pretentious for that as a 4? Like,
I mean, I think it's better to establish an aesthetic and do something in the rain than it is, because like, okay, so in Florida, I know it rains a lot. Okay, before climate change has really shifted all the weather patterns for us, in Florida, it used to be a thing in Central Florida. Every single day it would rain at 4 p.m. in the summer. That you had the morning to do something, then it would be too hot, then it would rain, and then you'd have the evening. Cool. And so we all knew that. And I think we could plan our days around that. Now in Florida, you don't know. It says it's going to rain. Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it won't rain. So I just stay in all day and do nothing. So I think adopting like a moody 4-girl aesthetic to be like, I'm actually going to do something with this day instead of just like wait to see if it rains. I think that's a great idea and not pretentious at all.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging in my 4 fantasies. I love you for that, Zara. You're always so supportive. And yeah, I mean,
is it supportive or is it enabling? That's a question we'll explore on another episode of Thoughtful Wellness Revolution.
Oh my gosh, you know what? So I wonder, because like, you know, you and I talk about the Enneagram and like try like type people and whatnot. Like, I wonder if ever, because you're like involved in the Enneagram world and we've interviewed Enneagram people, is if one day like another Enneagram expert teacher person will like listen to our podcast and like analyze like, this is how Zara's being a 2 and this is how Hyun's being a 4. Like I just think that'd be so funny. Like if you ever do that, let me know.
100% that will be a thing. And if you do that, please send me notes or like make me laugh. Send us notes and make us laugh. But I know that people do it because I do it I have been obsessed with podcasts this past year because, you know, a lot of mental and physical health days, but like being able to listen and be like, oh yeah, I can feel you've got some anxiety there, but is it like you're afraid of people not liking you, or are you like afraid of like the security being like trying to figure out like why? And then based on like personal stories people tell, and like I kind of just try to figure out what their type is. I obviously don't send them messages and say like, I think you're this type. And yeah, but I do think it's fascinating, and I hope someone will do it with us.
Yeah, please. I'm so curious. Like, please tell me, like, please call me out on it too. If you're like, oh, when you said that was a very 4 thing because of blah, blah, blah. Cause I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. Like, I'm so curious. And the dynamic between a 2 and a 4 is always really interesting. As for the people who know the Enneagram, I'm sure you know. For the people who don't, well, I don't know, you can Google it or something, but I find it really interesting.
Yeah. When also, if you're gonna email us, don't be fucking pretentious. Nobody wants a prescriptive, this is what you're doing wrong. You point out funny things, and then you give some insight if it's relevant. Don't be rude.
Oh yeah. So that's basically all we're saying. Email us at thoughtfulwellnessrevolution@gmail.com if you notice our Enneagram types coming out. And don't be rude, please.
Don't be rude.
Yeah.
I will get upset with you. And as you can hear in my very stern voice, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Zara, is there anything else you want to share?
No.
No, I love that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, or maybe there isn't. I don't know. I'm done. How about you?
That's good. That's great. You know what? I'm done too. And of course, we're just hoping that everyone is doing well. And thank you, everybody. We love you.
Friends. See you next time.
Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Thoughtful Wellness Revolution podcast. For bonus content, you can go to thoughtfulwellnessrevolution.substack.com and subscribe for $5 a month. You can also follow us on Instagram at Thoughtful Wellness Revolution to share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening.